Have you ever wondered what happens when divine beings abandon their sacred mission and surrender to human temptation? Throughout the ancient chronicles of angelic lore, one tale stands apart, not for its fame, but for the weight of its consequences: the fall of the Watchers. According to the apocryphal Book of Enoch, a group of 200 angels made a fateful choice. They descended from the heavens, drawn not by duty, but by desire. Their goal? To take human women as wives. In doing so, they shattered the laws of heaven and unleashed chaos upon the earth. What drove them to make such a devastating decision? What force could be powerful enough to tempt angels into rebellion? Even more shocking, among this host of fallen beings, was there one who found redemption when all others were condemned? The root of their rebellion lies in free will. Angels were created with purpose, but not without the capacity to choose. And when choice met temptation, their purity gave way to corruption. The Watchers weren't coerced. They willingly chose their fate. But redemption, that was never part of the plan, or so it seemed. Against all odds, one Watcher's story ends not in judgment, but in mercy. One name shines dimly through the darkness: Sariel. Sariel's tale is both haunting and extraordinary. Like the others, he descended to earth. Like the others, he swore an unbreakable oath atop the shadowed summit of Mount Hermon, a solemn pact that marked their defiance against heaven. The leader of this rebellion was Semjaza, and together with the rest, Sariel vowed to carry out their plan, fully aware that divine wrath awaited them. They weren't tricked. They weren't naive. These were celestial beings with full knowledge of their actions and of the irreversible line they were crossing. Sariel, however, was moved by something deeper, something the others had long forsaken. Though his feet touched earth alongside the rest, his heart never abandoned heaven. While the other Watchers eagerly imparted forbidden knowledge, teaching mankind sorcery, weapon forging, charms, and the secrets of the stars, Sariel remained a silent observer. He stood apart, never taking a human wife, never fathering Nephilim, never tampering with the divine order. He spent his time in contemplation, lifting his gaze skyward, yearning not for earthly pleasure but for divine clarity. He was not frozen by fear, but guided by wisdom. To his companions, this restraint looked like weakness, indecision. But Sariel knew that pausing before destruction was the first act of true strength. He recognized that rebellion didn't require action alone. Sometimes the refusal to follow was the greatest defiance. And so his story diverged. Not only did Sariel abstain, he actively resisted. There are ancient whispers, remnants of oral traditions, that tell of a Watcher who tried to dissuade his brethren, to awaken their conscience before it was too late. Sariel stood at the edge of a rising storm and pleaded with those around him. He warned of imbalance, of unnatural consequences. The Nephilim, born of angel and human, were not mere hybrids. They were harbingers of devastation. These beings grew in strength and rage, consuming the earth and corrupting its essence. They had no place in either realm. They were monstrosities born from a betrayal of divine law. And Sariel, burdened by foresight, knew that this infection would spread, that soon judgment would follow. But his voice was lost amid the chaos. Pride had deafened the fallen. Most of the Watchers had become so entangled in their new existence that they no longer resembled the celestial beings they once were. They reveled in their influence, adored by mortals, worshipped as gods. The memory of their divine origin faded beneath layers of pride and power. They had traded eternity for moments of earthly glory. But Sariel never let go of who he truly was. While others claimed thrones among men, he sought solitude. He stepped back from the noise, refusing to take part in the corruption. His silence was not passive, it was reverent, and heaven noticed. As the skies darkened and divine wrath approached, the Watchers continued their descent, unaware or uncaring that their time was running out. When judgment arrived, it did not hesitate. God dispatched his mightiest archangels, Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel, with a singular mission: to bind the rebels. With divine authority, they captured the watchers and cast them into the depths of the earth, into prisons of pitch darkness, chains forged by holy fire, where time itself stood still. Semjaza, Azazel, and the rest were sealed away, silenced, awaiting the great day of reckoning. And then something unexpected occurred. Among the 200, one was left untouched. Sariel was spared, not because heaven had overlooked him, but because heaven had been watching him most closely. Though he had descended, his soul remained aligned with the divine. He had neither defied God's boundaries nor contributed to humanity's fall. He had walked among men without becoming one of them. He had every opportunity to walk the same path of rebellion, to surrender to desire, to defy the Creator. But instead, Sariel chose silent obedience, a decision that demanded immense strength, especially when surrounded by so many who had fallen. This didn't make him immune to judgment. It simply made him worthy of an audience. According to ancient traditions, Sariel was brought before the throne of God, not as a criminal, not as a hero, but as a witness. He didn't plead for mercy. He didn't justify himself. He didn't need to. His restraint had already testified in his favor. He had remained clean when all others had chosen corruption. His neutrality was not indifference. It was loyalty expressed through discipline. And then something almost unimaginable happened. God chose to forgive him. Not just forgive, but reinstate. Sariel was restored to his original rank among the angels, an unprecedented act of grace. He, who stood on the edge of the abyss, was pulled back, not because he cried out, but because he never jumped. Some sources even suggest that Sariel's mission was elevated. He became the guardian of the spirits of the righteous, an angel whose proximity to the fall made him uniquely capable of protecting those who walk the narrow path. His tale is not about privilege, it's about choice. He faced the same trial, stood beneath the same sky, heard the same seductive voices, but he chose differently. Where others fell, he stood. Where others spoke, he remained silent. And in his silence, heaven heard obedience. Sariel's story reveals that descent doesn't always end in ruin. Between rebellion and submission, there exists a narrow path, one paved by discernment and patience. Sariel found it, and he walked it alone. He became the lone exception among 200, the solitary watcher who, surrounded by betrayal, remained aligned with the light. While others screamed their defiance, his silence echoed louder in the halls of heaven. And when judgment fell like a sword, it passed him by, not by chance, but by choice. His forgiveness was not a conclusion, it was the prologue to a greater destiny. From the edge of damnation, Sariel was not only redeemed, he was reborn, and his purified essence now serves as an eternal reminder that even in the darkest moments, the choice to obey still holds power. Heaven welcomed Sariel not as a mere survivor, but as a living emblem of loyalty, preserved in the midst of betrayal. He returned, not clothed in shame, but robed in divine affirmation, proof that integrity, even when isolated, is never ignored by the divine. But his reinstatement was not a simple return to former duties. It marked the beginning of something much greater. Sariel was not reinstated as a foot soldier in the heavenly host. He was elevated to a sacred rank, a position that only someone who had walked the line between ruin and redemption could truly fulfill. Among the innumerable angels of heaven, Sariel was counted among the elite few, the 7 holy angels who stand eternally before the throne of God. According to the book of Enoch, these 7 are not like the rest. They are heaven's highest emissaries, entrusted with divine authority and cosmic responsibilities. Each of them is a pillar in the structure of divine order, guiding stars that maintain the balance between justice and mercy, between heaven and earth. To be among them is to be entrusted with tasks of eternal significance. And Sariel, once on the edge of rebellion, now stood at the center of divine purpose. But what makes this honor truly profound is not just the title, but the nature of Sariel's mission. He was given charge over the souls who had stumbled but still sought light, the broken, the weary, the repentant, those who had failed but had not given up. God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that no angel was more suited to such a task than Sariel, because Sariel had stood where they stood. He had known the lure of darkness, felt the pull of rebellion, heard the whispers of pride, and chosen restraint instead. He didn't speak of hope from a distance. He embodied it. His story is not one of perfection, but of preservation, not of innocence, but of integrity. And it is precisely this that makes him the perfect guardian for those on the edge. Sariel became a bridge between justice and mercy, a heavenly reminder that even those who fall can rise again, if they choose rightly. This sacred responsibility placed Sariel closer to humanity than most celestial beings would ever be, not as a punisher or an overseer of wrath, but as a quiet guardian to those teetering on the edge. He walks beside the bruised and the burdened, the flawed who still reach for redemption. His presence, though unseen, becomes real in the quiet moments of conscience, in the sudden thought to turn back, the whispered voice that urges restraint, the invisible hand that pulls someone away from the brink. Sariel is the echo of divine patience, a constant yet silent force offering one more chance. Enoch, the patriarch who walked with God and never tasted death, bears witness to Sariel's exalted position in his heavenly visions. He describes him not just as a figure of rank, but as a steward of immense responsibility, an overseer of destinies, a watcher of the soul's battlefield. He holds the tension between judgment and grace, not to decide it, but to maintain its sacred balance. Where some angels were chosen to wage wars or deliver plagues, Sariel was chosen to sit with the struggling, to see their battles, to understand their hearts, and to guide them silently back to light. His mission is not driven by authority, but by compassion, not punishment, but presence. This divine choice reveals the depth of God's understanding. He knew that the one who had faced temptation and resisted, who had walked among the rebels yet remained loyal, was the most fitting to help those who still had a choice to make. Sariel's story is a blueprint of redemption in action, a life of second chances lived not in pride, but in service. He does not shout from the heavens about his forgiveness. Instead, he whispers hope into the hearts of those on the edge of surrender. And what truly sets Sariel apart is that he remembers. He remembers the weight of the oath on Mount Hermon, the glow in the eyes of angels seduced by rebellion, and the monstrous rise of the Nephilim that turned earth into a playground of destruction. He remembers the moment heaven sealed the fate of his brothers, and the stillness that followed, a silence so absolute it felt like mourning. This memory did not break him, it shaped him. It forged in him a divine empathy, a sacred sensitivity to the gravity of human decisions. And because of this, he does not judge from a distance. He walks alongside. He knows that what seems like a small compromise can set a soul on a path of no return. And he also knows how choosing integrity in a moment of silence can shift the course of eternity. Sariel understands the fragile balance of human will, the thin line between surrender and resilience. That is why, according to certain ancient accounts, he also participates in the discernment of souls. Not to judge them, but to help separate those still clinging to the light from those who have embraced the darkness with full awareness. He does not condemn, he recognizes, and in that recognition lies the echo of his own story. Who better to stand beside the faltering than one who once stood on the brink and chose to step back? His mission, far from ending in the ancient past, is said to continue to this very day. Sariel, now restored, walks the world as a hidden helper, not through visions or miracles, but through quiet influence. You won't see him, but many who suddenly feel convicted, who find clarity in moments of confusion, who sense a gentle nudge away from danger, may, without knowing it, be feeling his presence. Sariel's influence is like the wind, unseen but undeniably felt by those who need it most. His story compels us to reimagine the idea of the fall, to see it not as a final sentence, but as a pivotal moment where redemption remains possible. For even the closest brush with ruin can become the beginning of renewal if the heart turns back in time. Sariel made that turn, and now his eternity is shaped not by shame, but by purpose. Not just forgiven, but transformed into a force for guiding others home. He is the angel who fell but did not fall apart, the single voice among 200 that remained aligned with heaven. And for that, he became more than just restored. He became a restorer. If this story of Sariel has stirred something within you, if it made you pause, reflect, or wonder, know that there are countless other ancient truths waiting to be uncovered. So if you're drawn to these deep hidden mysteries between heaven and earth, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell icon, because the next revelation might change everything you thought you knew.